Good morning, everyone. So let's get things up and running. Start making paint, continue making paint. I've started making paint this morning, and then I needed to fix a 3D printer. So those are things that I also need to do to keep things up and running. So let this kind of dry. I don't know, for those of you who might be rewatching, I'm using invisible gloves before I start making paint. Since it creates a little layer over my skin to make it, even hydrophobic pigments, very staining pigments, just wash away with ease. But it's kind of sticky now still, so I need to let it dry, and then I won't feel a thing anymore. It dries quite easily. In the meantime, let's get everything we need. We're going to start with a few things over here. Need to make sure everything is up and running. I'm just going to Tracy, good morning, welcome. Just going to be very kind of blunt. This isn't because you just entered. I'm just going to stick this link over here. I've added the link on my social media, Instagram, YouTube, you name it. I've opened my shop. I thank you. Good to hear that. Wow. I've opened my shop again, and I'm making paint as scheduled and as efficiently as I can. Loads of pre-orders, which I am very thankful of. But I also noticed pigments got way more expensive over the last few months. And my laptop kind of crashed. It's working right now, but I'm just running a browser while I was updating my shop. So I'm in need for a new laptop as well. But to buy pigments and things, that's why I added the link. I'm just saying this for everyone who might rewatch it as well. It's a Ko-fi link if you want to support my channel. Since I haven't monetized my YouTube yet, I can't do the super fan or thanks button on the YouTube. I'm just going to put it on like this. Thank you very much, Tracy. I have some things up my sleeve, but it's kind of I've added a lot of new pigments. I am offering over 70 single pigments at the moment. 4 of those are mixes with sea green, sap green, dirty blue, and dirty blue exclusive. I also have the blasphemous Earth Day muddy mix, mineral mix I'm offering in my shop. But that's kind of an inside thing for those of you who've seen the video, which is also a mix, obviously. I usually don't use more than 2 pigments in my mixes. With that, I added, I don't know, you need to rewatch the video, a lot of them. I think maybe 10 pigments, earth and mineral pigments. And it gave me a lovely texturized bright orange earth. So over 70 single pigments at the moment. Okay, so my invisible gloves have dried up. For the paint I'm going to make now. Let's first clean the slab just a little bit. How are you doing, Tracy, since you're the only one here until now? Good to hear that you're doing good today. So we are making a new layer of PBR11. Thanks for asking. Yeah, the girls are actually doing great. They've started school again 2.5 weeks ago, and it does cost us quite some energy, since you know, we need to get things on track again after the holidays. And getting everything like almost a routine in the morning, the evening routine, everything like that is quite a bit sometimes. No, but they're doing great. I need to have a look, because this can't be right. Yeah, it is right. It is right, but I noticed one of my technical difficulties I had before opening the shop was the pictures. Like, I'm really confused. I'm making PBR11 right now, which looks like this, dried in a pan. It's had 2 small layers, but the images on my Etsy, I'm going to change it. I really need to use a different laptop for it, since I've changed the pictures of my products on my Etsy, and really the accuracy of the color is far from perfect, and it really annoys me. I'm just looking at my shop here on my iPad, and you know, that does run Photoshop, but the amount of layers and swatches I had in the formats with the font as well, my dirty blue font, which I'm using, that it doesn't work on that, so that's a shame. But the color accuracy there, yeah, it's the color. It's like you see this is a very bright orangey iron magnesium oxide, which is how I call it, but other brands use this pigment under lunar earth. And it's a very bright, very granulating, really lovely paint. But on my Etsy right now, and I see this screen is color accurate, it looks like a very boring umber. And that's not a good thing if I just added this to my line of paint. So I've also had the same question with manganese blue. Someone said it looks more grey than I know it to be. it is the brightest granulating blue that I can offer, that anyone I think can offer. But that picture just doesn't do it justice at all. So I need to have a look at that. Pictures from my camera. Good. Pictures after editing, or actually after just putting text on and around it, not so good. So maybe there's something that goes wrong with importing him and exporting him. But I really need to have a look at that. Anyway, making paint again. I'm using the big muller for it. Thanks, Tracy. It was, it is still my intention. I want to add a lot of things to my Etsy as well. I actually was working on a different kind of thumbnail image. I had these, and I was working on a different kind of thumbnail image, but that, I don't know, the pictures were, after editing, the pictures were too big. Then I needed to kind of crop them. And they weren't all, like, they didn't all look that good on the Etsy size. Let me just put it like that. So I eventually stopped putting time in that and started, you know, working on actually making paint instead of looking at which image would work best. I know the format that I have is very on brand. It's like which I like for my brand. My brand is kind of your in your face font, big letters, big, like it's all capitals, and I thought, you know, just a nice swatch of the paint and those pigment numbers showing almost all single pigments would work for my brand. Hopefully it does. Can't complain about the sales. I'm very grateful for everyone who already bought something in my reopened shop. But it's not very Etsy-ish. Anyway, back to making the paint. So a lot of the paints, almost all of the paints that I offer at the moment are in pre-order. Some of the paints really are, like, they are just like this one. They aren't done at all yet. But I think by putting everything on pre-order, it just gives me a little bit more time to see what people prefer, what people are after. So that was also a thing I needed to just have a look at. What are people interested in? Which pigments? I know it's not kind of, it seems like a race sometimes, who offers the most single pigments or who offers the most different colors. It's really hard to compete and impossible for me as a like a small business, a single person, employee, owner, creator, marketing director. I don't know, all the different rules that I need to be I can't compete with the big brands. All bigger small businesses. I have a glass slab. I have a, well, this is a big muller, but a muller. I have two hands, so I can use. I can even use the desk over there and make two paints at once. It'll make a mess, and it probably doesn't do any good for the quality of my paint. But I can only do so much. And the pigments that I offered now are a mix of things that I really wanted to add to my shop, and things that have just been laying around for so long that the pigment got discontinued since I bought it. So PR206 and PR48 are two of them. I have the pigment. Like a few new jars of the pigment, which I bought because I thought they were really interesting colors to add to my line of paint before I even started collecting pigments. And now they got discontinued, so it kind of, why wait, right? I've waited so long that they got discontinued, so I can wait until they get rare and like super special, or I can just help out people who actually miss the pigments that still know the pigments. Thanks a lot, Tracy. And I'm very thankful for you understanding. I hope that there's a 3D printer running. I hope that isn't really clear in the audio. I'm not monitoring the audio myself, so. Also a very practical thing, I had to pre-order some existing colors. Okay, that's good. That's great actually, because it would be really annoying if you did hear it even without headphones. I closed my shop in June, May, I don't know, somewhere like that. For very practical reason. For the taxes, that was like a perfect moment to just stop the income from my shop for tax reasons. But I did keep making paint after that. Only we went away a few weeks to France with the family, and I think the day after we left, we've had great weather and we've had a great holiday, but the day after we left, I think it started raining here in the Netherlands, and it didn't stop raining for I think 6 weeks. And for a few weeks of that, I wasn't in my studio. I didn't turn on my dehydrator. Wow, dehumidifier. Wow. Dehydrator. I didn't turn that on. There was the air conditioning was turned off. Like we weren't here. So some of my paint got really sticky again, the top layer, which was actually dry before that time. So I couldn't top those up. I could have done that. I didn't want to do that until it was dry again. So what I'm just doing right now is, like I've showed in my classes as well, you can test by, looking at this piece over here, that negative space, if your paint is well dispersed. So to full transparency over here, where you see the slab, until you don't see any glass shining through at all. It does the exact same thing as this one. So before I start using this one, my printer is finished. I'm going to turn that off. I've printed new Egyptian palettes, and they came out quite nice. There was some technical difficulties with the printer as well, so I needed to fix that this morning. But letting it cool down, there's a few nice new Egyptian palettes over there. Yeah, life. That's something. Okay, so let's have a comparison between the good morning, between the slab test, as I've showed here, and this one. Oh, touched it with my hands here, so you see that it's a little bit greasy. I'm going to clean that with alcohol, but the swipe was good. The swipe was good. So it confirms what I already saw on the slab. It is a lot nicer. It's very quiet for me right now. The printer does add some white noise to my studio. But you know, we're on YouTube, and I can't turn on music right now because, you know, copyright issues. So that's a shame. Yes, I can put in my headphones while I'm talking to you, but I'll do that when I get really tired of myself, which is maybe already, but it's part of being wanting to create content. Oh, you need to listen to yourself a lot. Yeah, I need to. I need to. For me, it is. It's part of my process, but it's also part of doing everything I can to make sure the end user, you, the artist, gets what they're paying for. I can roughly see at least time and country. So which times are best, and the countries where my viewers are located. No, sorry, I'm very visual, so I was kind of trying to picture that, and it would be really wouldn't be really fair for you if I start like making music with my palette knife and brush, or with this thing on the glass slab, since there's a microphone there as well, and on my chest, so it wouldn't be really fair, and I think I wouldn't get any more viewers when I do that, and I would make a terrible mess out of things. Thinking of a name for myself already. Like the Blue Men group is already there, but maybe the Dirty Blue Men single men, not a group. Splashing in paint. Okay, I ran out of pens for PBR11, but since I'm the generous person that I am, oh sorry, I'm going to just retop the dot pens as well for this, because it shrunk quite a bit. So I did receive, people ordered a lot of paints. I really can't complain. I had, I think, good morning Sandra, I think you can even check that on my Etsy, but I got a little below 20 orders, I think. But they were quite big orders, so a lot of paints at once. So really can't complain. A lot of the new things. People coming back, refilling, mixing pellets, things like that. So I'm really grateful for everyone who already ordered my something at my shop. There is a sale, a minus 10% sale until tomorrow. So after tomorrow, that won't be the case anymore. Just saying. And I added dots to most of my new paints as well, because I really like the idea of just trying things out. I am in contact with a local art supply shop. I'm in contact. I'll be dropping this off this week. So these are my dot pens, dot cards. Sorry, those are dot pens. With my sample cards, which I also offer in my shop. So this will be in the store to just introduce handmade paints to well, anyone here. And after that, we're going to have a look if half pens would work as well. But by what I wanted to say, by thinking about that, I noticed that a lot of people can't appreciate handmade paints because they've never used them, because they think they are too expensive. And I completely agree with them. They are expensive if you think, okay, I'm going to compare this brand, which is really famous, and then you see that. So a very well-known brand, it must be good. And that's only €3 for a half pen of ultramarine blue, whereas mine would be, depending on where you are and what the taxes are, maybe 2-3 times as expensive. So why would I buy that? But when you use them next to each other, hopefully, you know, everyone here knows this. There is a big difference, and that price difference can be justified when you know about how it's made and how they work against the cheaper big brands. Thank you very much, Tracy. Really thankful. And I'm glad you appreciate the dots. So I need to not everyone has the what for it. Oh, I think that's pocketbook. Oh, sorry, it's just one letter, but that looked really weird. No, no, and I understand. I really understand, and I wouldn't blame. I don't blame anyone. And thanks, Stephanie. It's the dots things. I think I said it like every live, but I'm very proud still on the design, and I'm really glad I can offer it. Professional paints are very expensive compared to the paint pucks that are offered to children, and there is consumable to handmade paint versus commercial. Yeah, yes, but I also it's a bit of self promo here, but you know, it's my channel. We can do that. I think that's another thing, and I also offer it in my shop. What we're talking about, the paints, kids paint. Good morning, everyone. It's a shame to see kids, children, or even students just be disappointed in the amount of color that is left on the paper by those cheap paints, or some cheap paints, not all of them. There are some pretty good ones. I'm just going to pick, that's the fun thing, I'm always forgetting that I'm wearing a wireless microphone. We can just walk here. That's why I introduced the kids palette on my Etsy. And I know I've done a rant video series, 3 videos, on the word pigmented, but I used it there because I do think when it comes to kids paint, pigmented is the right term for it. When we're not, well, you know, this paint isn't more pigmented than another color that I offer. This paint has a different quality, personality, if you will, if you've looked at my podcast. So this paint could be more tinting. It could be, the color strength of this pigment would be greater than that of a similar color. Let me think of a similar color. The Icelandic pigment, for instance. When we look at the red or the yellow, this is like something in between color-wise. This is way more tinting. The color strength is way higher than those pigments. This is a synthetic pigment. It makes sense. But when we're talking paint kits, kids paint. Wow, paint kids. Let's not paint our kids. When we're talking kids paint, I think pigmented would be the right term for it. Saturated, I don't think, saturated in pigment. So when I'm not talking about saturation of a color, but how saturated a paint is with pigment. So I think that could be a right term for it when we're looking at the amount of binder that can be used versus raw pigment. I'm trying to get it as saturated as possible. If I would add more pigment, the paint will fall apart or will swipe off the paper. So yes, but I would do that with every paint that I make. So that again is, this wouldn't be more saturated than another color when we're talking about the amount of pigment that is in it, or tinting strength. Tinting strength, or yeah, tinting strength would be best, I think. I think tinting strength is a really nice term, since when we would look up what is the difference between a tinted tone and a shade, a tint is something mixed with white, a tone is something mixed with grey, and a shade is something mixed with black or a dark pigment. I'm not really thinking that black and white, that was a little pun, but I do think tinting strength is very nice to measure. If you mix a certain amount of paint with the same amount of titanium white, for instance, you do that with cobalt blue, you do that with yin min blue, you do that with ultramarine blue, and you do that with the same amount of titanium white, you would see that one pigment is more tinting than the other. One pigment stays more blue for a longer time, the more titanium white you add to it. So 1 on 1, 1 part blue, 2 parts white, 1 part blue, 3 parts white. Some pigments, phthalo blue, would stay blue for a longer time, tinting strength. It also applies for when you mix it with a different color. So a pigment with a very low tinting strength, which I really think is a shame, because I really wanted to add that to my line of paint, but I didn't see any use for it. Please let me know if you want to see it. PV14 Cobalt Violet. Love it. Love the color. It is in its like mass tone and almost, whereas I would see manganese blue as the perfect, I'm not talking about the granulation, but as a perfect cyan within that hue circle. I would see cobalt violet as the closest thing to a perfect magenta. Maybe a little bit more to the quinacridone side, but I would see that as a perfect magenta. And it is of very little use in a palette. If you want to see that, let me know exactly watercolors, because I will add it to my shop. Really, I want to say I have tons of it, but I have enough PV14 here to just add it as a standard paint to my shop. But maybe you've seen my video where I mix secondaries to make primaries, or secondaries, not even secondaries, but where I mix violet pigments with yellow pigments to make red, or violet with blue to make violet with green to make blue. PV14 would be a perfect one if it was more tinting, but it is the color strength of it. It's just a very weak color. It's a shame. Stephanie, you're absolutely right there. It is exquisite, and they are gorgeous if you work very transparently, but it's very granulating as well. So I think PV14, looking at the amount of pigments that I added to my shop versus the usability of it, I added manganese violet, I added a perylene violet, I added more, right? Help me out. No, you don't have to help me out. Quinacridone magenta, quinacridone violet, perylene violet, ultramarine violet. There's loads of violets at the moment in my shop, and really happy with it. You are saying something there. You are saying something there. Floral painters. True. Although I would like to encourage them to try Yintico Red. It is not as bright and magenta-y as Cobalt Violet, PV14 or PV49. Really kind of the PV14 Lights version, which I have, is almost similar. I think it's exactly the same as PV49 in all its aspects. But yeah. Okay, so back to making paint. Or actually, let's just clean this first. Thank you. Yes, This is Victoria Green, for those who are wondering. It is a very, 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 very lovely green. Also very transparent. Okay, you're right, I've added this. So why wouldn't I add PV14? Well, I have kind of a vision of what I want to do with my shop. I want to add more colors more frequently. So I don't want to do that every 2 weeks, for instance. But every 2 months, or maybe a month and a half, 6 times a year, to adding more pigments to my shop would be ideal, I think, to keep it fresh, to keep it... Oh, that's the doorbell. If you have one moment. I'll be right back. And I'm back again. Okay, so where was I? Okay, the pigments that I want to add, so I have some in mind that I think, okay, those would be really nice additions to my line of paint. But also I've had the question of subscriptions in last chat live. So pigments that will be maybe more exclusive, or just wouldn't really be a necessary part of my main line of paint, but would be a nice addition to everyone who likes colors, pigments, watercolors. So yeah, let me have a look. Sorry about that. Tracy thinks it will be interesting. It is interesting. PV15 corpse starch, I think, feel a similar rule as PV14 in most palettes. Lower toxicity, less environmental impact, yes, although it shifts way more towards the left side of that hue circle. Even when you're talking about a very pink PV15, and it is less bright. So I see the use for PV14. Stephanie asks how many pigments are available to Lawrence. What do you mean to me? How many do I have, or what is your question there, if I may ask? And thanks for the for liking the Paint Maker's travel kit that I showed. I've had that for a very long time. And I did show it once on Instagram, I think. That I can buy, well, if money wouldn't be a problem. No, I think I'm close to having almost all pigments in my collection that are used for watercolors currently. So, and I'm talking about pigment index numbers. PR206, PV19, PB29, things like that. So if you would take a catalog of pigment numbers, I would have almost all of them. Even the ones that I complained about not having them, I'm seeing them being part of my collection in a very, very near future. But I'm not sure if that was your question, Stephanie. Oh, I'm making a mess here. No, I wouldn't use that traveling kit outside on a windy day or rainy day. Doesn't have to be outside, but it happened to be lovely weather and there wasn't too much wind. I've only did a voiceover on one part of the video. That was the pigment part. The rest of it I actually just recorded straight while I was recording the video with the camera and a microphone. So there wasn't any wind at all that bothered me. You can look them up on eBay. I think a Swiss medic bag, Swiss Army medic bag, leather, and you find something. There are more modern versions. There are very similar versions, but they are available. I had to treat this one with wax a couple of times for the leather to be pliable again. Thank you very much, Corpsage. When I'm looking at I think, you know, I really love my studio and how it looks at the moment, but I think if I would have more space and I can actually display it properly, that would really kind of do justice to it. But I have an Excel file with all the pigments that I have. So if I need to look something up, it's in my collection, I can just look it up digitally, which really helps. As you can see on this slab, it is quite a tinting pigment. It stays on the slab even for quite a long time for something of this color, because I'm used to, you know, browns and things like that, especially granulating pigments, to be quite easy to clean. But this one likes sticking around for a bit longer. That's very important to know where you got things from, and so you can also always get back to it. Let's get a new one. Okay, for those of you who are also joining us, welcome. I'm going to have a look which color I'm going to make next. And I'm actually going to have a look in my dehydrator over here. What would be best to make next? I also really like having a new new cupboards for my pigments that I have in my line of paint at the moment, which makes like taking a pigment really easy. Instead of, some of you might know the cupboard which I have, the very old one, the wooden one with all my pigments. They all used to be in that, which really made it hard for me piling them up, stacking them, and making sure they didn't fall over. Quinacridone Rose. PV19. Should we start with 2? Let's make it 3. So with this pigment, since it is a very fine pigment, it's not as hydrophobic as some can be, but it is a very, very fine pigment. I like to use the method that I showed in my Indian yellow video. And I'm going to show it here as well. I'm using the method mostly with hydrophobic pigments. Well, it changed after that, Tracy. So might be able to give you a quick look. Let me have a look if I can. Kind of, there's a bit of things in the way here. I'm just going to do that later. Yeah, it's I bought 2 very narrow cupboards just for the pigments that I use for Etsy. So the paints that I sell. Oh, my cat is whining. One of the cats. When I'm working, the door to my studio, when I'm making paint, the door to my studio is closed. Usually I've turned on music and I don't even hear any meowing sound. But when I'm talking and when there's no one else, she thinks she's left out of something. So she wants attention. She wants the attention that she knows someone else is getting. But usually she doesn't even visit me. Usually she doesn't even want to visit me, but she doesn't even come near the studio. There's nothing interesting here. But when she is talking, it starts to get interesting because I'm not talking to her, so. Oh my god. I don't know if you can hear the sound of my cat meowing. But it's really getting annoying. And now she's scratching the door as well. Great. The most organized non-industrial paint maker I've seen. Thank you very much. I need to be for myself. and my customers. But if I'm not, I really couldn't do this, I think. Thing is, I'm not going to auto when there's wet paint on my slab, or even dry pigment that still needs to be wetted. But this is getting quite annoying. For me, at least. I don't know if it bothers you. But as part of, you know, working at home, having a studio at home. Well, but home renovations, Tracy, are usually something to look forward to, right? To, you know, the result. Not the renovation itself. It can be quite stressful. And but if anyone volunteers here to be my assistant on site, you're very welcome to help me out. I'm not covering any travel expenses or anything like that, and you do need to bring your own laptop so you can do the editing and Photoshop thing for me, since, you know, you can borrow mine, but that doesn't work. So it's that. Thanks for sharing. But still, a 120-year-old jar of bitumen. At least you can say it's vintage, right? Sorry. That's good to know. That's good to know. I'm working on that's. I'm working on new colors. I am working on new colors, but the emphasis on working on, since those are mixes. I'm making a mix for Paris green, something that is very similar in all the aspects. So not only the color, but also the handling aspects of it. I'm also working on Mummy. It really sounds like my cat has her tail between a door or something. I don't know if you can hear it, but I would be surprised if you didn't hear it. I think someone here asked for Paris green. I'm not. I will never. I will never sell it in my shop. No, I won't be offering arsenic paint or anything of the matter in my shop. I can, like I said before, do an exchange or something like that professionally, but then I need to know who I'm talking to as well. Let me get back to the chat. You have a mix for mummy, but it doesn't match yours. What kind of mix do you have? I'm wondering. It's also a bit more yellow. It could be. At least I don't know what kind of mix it is. If it's a custom mix or that someone made, or maybe that a company sells under that name. But there are swatches online of like genuine mummy, of a page of a book which has a hand-painted swatch in it, and that exact page, the scan of that page, differs website by website. It really is. I don't know. How much do the mixing media affect the colors? Well, we can go on for quite long about that, depending on which pigment you use and depending what kind of medium you use. But basically, the gum arabic, which is like honey-ish in color, doesn't affect it at all, because the amount of gum arabic that is in the paint mixed with pigment that is on your brush is, well, it doesn't have any influence. But when you're talking Prussian blue, for instance, in oils and watercolors, great. But in acrylics, not so great, because it's not stable in acrylics. Because how base or alkaline a medium is, it does have influence on pigments. So that binder would have influence on Prussian blue, for instance. You can't use a binder or a medium that has high acidity when you're mixing ultramarine, for instance, things like that. More came into the chat. Welcome, everyone. You have the book. Look at that. I think I have a copy of it. I'm not sure. But you know, the book, how was it printed? How well were they translated from RGB to CYMK? Things like, yeah, all things you need to keep in mind. Are you going to add your palettes to your Etsy shop? Kami R, what do you mean with palettes? Because I have added my mixing palette and I have, or do you mean empty palettes? Or what do you mean? The mix in my notes is in my notes somewhere. One of them was very specific PBR for 7 PBR 43, or PBR 43, PY 43, and calcium carbonate. I've been experimenting with a PBR 25 blend. Well, I can tell you something about the blend that the mix that I made to experiment with, and it actually it contained a lot of materials that I've tried to look at all the ingredients that would be in Mummy Brown. I have Kami R. I have the mixing palette, which is 14 pigments available in my shop, if that's what you mean. I'm just going to quickly look to my shop, and it should be available still. Yeah, it's the pre-order Dirty Blue Essentials. I haven't put Mummy Brown under the microscope. No, I haven't. Didn't really have time for the microscope scope lately, though I did want to do a video on it and a certain pigment. The book is terrible for trying to match colors. Everything is desaturated and yellowish. I'm just happy I have the book I found. Yeah. The microscope will show annoyed bits of dead cats. Maybe I can show my cat, you know, if you keep whining, this is what happened. No, I'm taking that back. Sorry, cut that out. Yeah, no, the mixing palette is still there, and for one more day it will be 10% off still. Also, there's a highly pigmented, sorry about the term, Union paint set, which is also for on sale, part of the sale. And obviously my Egyptian palette. No, but I didn't have time for Mummy under the microscope. Yeah. Unfortunately, you really need high art quality prints, especially for those old books, which could you, Kami, before you order anything, I don't know if you are on a laptop or a computer or on your phone, could you try using the link in my YouTube bio before for buying? This is really it sounds like a rude question, but I made an affiliate link to my own shop, and I want to actually see if it works, because I noticed that if you use a mobile device, if you have the Etsy app, it switches to the Etsy app, and then the affiliate link doesn't work anymore. So if you can try it, I will be very thankful. I can actually see if it did work. If you don't want to try it, also fine. If you are on a computer, I understand it's like I don't want to force you into doing anything, but I just want to have a look if it actually works, because that was kind of my way to thinking of a loophole to lower the percentages that Etsy takes. But that's just oh, thank you very much. No, I would be very grateful if you try. If it works, awesome. If it doesn't work, well, then I also know that. Thanks, Tracy. I maybe have been a little bit too busy, if I'm really honest. Also because, you know, there were some things that, like the rehydrated paints, that set me back. And it wasn't really ideal to have a reopening in mind just after the holidays, but everything at a time, right? I hope it does. I'll have a look if I can see that a purchase was made via that link. And Stephanie, I thank you, but I have to check it. To be honest, I did check it after the first few orders. If anyone clicked on it in my stories on Instagram or in the link in bio thing, but I haven't checked it afterwards. We can check it in a minute, I think. But there are things to come back to, and thanks in advance, Tracy, to come back to what you said, Tracy. So my initial idea, which still is active, I still want to do that. I am going to do it. Let me just put it like I'm going to do it, but I need to do one thing at a time. First, I need to color adjust the images on my Etsy. Kami, if you're looking at it, colors on the new thumbnails with the big pigment numbers on it aren't all accurate. Some of them are, some of them aren't. So if you have questions, let me know. Other thing, I wanted to have a swatch video, just a 3-second video of me swatching that pigment when you scroll over the image. Right, a video behind an image works on Etsy, and I have a couple of them with azurite, I think, and lapis lazuli. I have the videos how I made them, but just a very quick 3-second, maybe 5-second swatching video when you swipe over the image would be like, in my head, that would be ideal. Also, spectrometer readings for every pigment, for every swatch that I made. Placed in a hue circle, so you can actually see how my paints are located within that hue circle on my Etsy listings with every paint that I offer. So loads of ideas, not enough time, but Stephanie, if you did want to assist, like I said, feel free to do so. I don't know, I can look it up on Etsy, by the way. That feels like something breaking your privacy, but I don't know where you're located. I'm actually never looking that up until I ship the shipping labels. And I actually never look at names too. I'm just kind of making sure the right order goes to the right address without sometimes without even looking who the order is for. I sometimes notice names and I think, hey, that's someone I know. Oh, that's only 9 hours. That's doable, right? I wouldn't expect any 9 to 5 days, right, from you. And I might be able to see if I can create kind of a spot for sleeping in my studio so you can work during the night as well. No, sorry. To prevent the jet lag, I'm offering night shifts in my studio in the Netherlands. It is on voluntary basis, right? You know that, Corpsarge. And please take all the pictures you want. If that is how I could pay someone working for me, I'd settle for that. Well, matching dry pigments wouldn't be really ideal, I think. So I would let you make paint out of it as well to bring home a bit of paint, maybe the swatch, depending on how rare it is. Oh, don't want to tip things over here. Let me have a look. Sorry, I was looking if everything was still working on my side. Yeah, okay, that's true. That's true. But for some pigments, that's really hard, right? Just wondering. I mean, when we're looking at cobalt green dark, which I also added, that would be well, kind of, you know, understandable. But a caput mortuum would be really hard, right? I've made that last live, and that just changes 3 times. Pigment, wet state on the plate, dry on the swatch. It's all different colors. If you want to, please share more. If you think, you know, that's a nice secret way of experimenting, I fully understand as well. How does it work in I've seen it in oils, but how does it work in acrylics? The same pigment. But this is what I mean. This is like this almost looks like quinacridone magenta, and it's not when I open the jar, but through the plastic. And when it's drying a little bit as well, very red in the pan. But when I just add water to it, it's fluorescent. Like it's not only my camera. This is fluorescent. Yeah, please send an image. Or we can't share anything here right now. But like I said, this is just this looks like a fluorescent paint. I have in my studio right now, but that is, you know, because I wanted to invest a little bit in YouTube things. I'm using my phone for my live streams, my podcast, everything that I record with camera. I'm using my phone for it. I did invest in some microphones. So I have a wireless microphone here. I have a shotgun microphone, a little shotgun microphone. Over there, I have a portable video microphone as well, and my podcast microphone, all from Rode. I know I've not been sponsored, but I really like the brand. I really like their products. But I have invested in some lights as well. 2 LED panels for live streaming, recording, and this. But I also right now have a smart light that can do, I think, what did it say? 128 million different colors, I think. But some of them are everything between the warmest and the coolest lights, measured in kelvins. So I've everything on daylight right now. I've shut my blinds for the window that's in front of me. because it's very sunny again, but that also makes it kind of blinding to have the reflection of that. You can see the sun over here, but to have a reflection of that on the plate. So having daylight lamps or anything that can mimic different temperatures is really useful. And also ranting again here. It's actually quite important to have the right light while painting or making paint, or swatching or mixing anything. I don't really need to worry about having to check which color this will give me, since it is a single pigment. Yeah, but that's also a different thing. White balance in photography, or also how accurate your camera is in capturing colors. Also thinking about the surrounding colors, which can influence the white balance if you don't use the right settings. It's really hard. And you really need to color adjust everything afterwards, which I need to do when you're not using a display that can handle it right on my Etsy. Or I had a display which was handling right, but I think there's something wrong with the display and the processor. And some other things. As you can see, this is quite a staining pigment as well. Do you, Tracy? Do you have them like in daylight modus, if it's possible, in the evening as well? Or some people really like that. I like it in my studio, but throughout the house, I wouldn't have. I think have it in the evening, but that's just a personal thing. Sorry, don't play with your muller. Depending what you want to do with it, I would say watercolor paper would be maybe a little bit too much off-white. If you have quite white watercolor paper, make sure it's hot pressed as well. If you want everything to be in focus. Oh. Okay. That is all. Okay. Also really depending on what you want to take pictures of. I kind of missed that, I think. And to come back at what you said, Kolbstach, about the Caput Mortuum, there's several pigments that I have that are called Deadhead, which would be a translation for it. Deadhead Red, Deadhead Violet, Deadhead Brown, I think one is called as well. I've started to get like more actively cleaning as well, since I kind of got lazy with my measuring spoons and all threw them like in a pan over in a metal, what is it, bucket over there, and cleaning everything like 3 times a week. That took a long time. Coffee, that's a very good idea, Tracy. I don't know if others will agree on that, but I'm going to get some coffee as well. In the meantime, I'm going to bring back the pigments. Need to stay organized, right? I've given you high expectations, so I'll be right back with a cup of coffee. You see, I really need it. Good idea, Tracy. If I can only find my cup for the coffee. There it is. All right, I'm back with the coffee. Yeah. Okay, I'm back. And I'm catching up on the chat. Is the translation "useless remains"? Is that referring to pigments, or to whatever was left of other remains? If you know what I mean. I don't want to sound too mysterious about that, but thinking it sometimes gets confused with mummy. You know what kind of remains I'm talking about, I think. So as a little promotional break here, I do offer the dot card, sample card, I called it, because I don't want people to confuse dots with samples, but basically that's the same amount of paint that goes into a dot pan. And I've had some questions, you know, why these pigments? I've had some comments that people thought there was a great selection of pigments. I really like these pigments. That's just, to be honest, I just like working with them. I like making paint out of it. I really like the properties. I like it. So I haven't chosen for like something that kind of avoids harmful or toxic pigments, since I added cobalt teal PG50 to it. There's loads of staining ones, high tinting strength colors, weaker ones. And obviously you can't mix everything with this, but I think it's great, like introduction to a very transparent, highly tinting yellow pigment, which leans towards the green gold, PY129. Granulating red, affordable one, Potter's pink. Indian red Indian red and Imperial scarlet as two quite opaque colors with a lot of different properties. You know, mixing benzy yellow, quinacridone magenta with ultramarine of phthalo could give you a wider range of colors. Adding a green, didn't want to add an orange because I thought, you know, Indian yellow and Imperial scarlet gives you great saturated, highly chromatic oranges. Cobalt teal, really not necessary when you think about, you know, having a phthalo green and blue in your palette, but it granulates and it's more opaque, less staining. Yellow ochre, just an earthy yellow to mix to tone everything down a bit when you want to work more in a more natural way. So I thought this, I think this is a great selection of paint, which I personally enjoy. One thing I didn't add to my shop, which I did actually say I wanted to add, forget about this brush, is the dot palette. Because I had a sample card, I first want to see how that was, what that was doing, and I offered dots for all my paints, and I think, you know, offering a kind of pre-made set of dots would be a nice introduction. It's my mixing palette. The top and bottom row is my complete mixing palette, and this one, green gold, dioxazine violet, cobalt teal, benzy orange, yinmin blue, and yintico red. These would be replaced with, for instance, a Potter's pink and fill it in something else. Oh wow, that's right. I remember that. Yeah. I didn't know it was a residue for making a Venetian red. That is quite interesting. But you know, there were a lot of times where people didn't really think about the pigments that were used when they wanted certain colors. The largest amount of Paris green that I have, Schweinfurtergrün, is from a monastery. Their wooden sculptures in the church, in the monastery, and the church nearby, were all painted and renovated as well with that pigment. Thinking about, you know, how harmful that is as a paint, dried, powder, wet state, I don't care. what kind of use it has, it is not the wisest choice for using it in a church. And this would be my shimmer palette, which I also didn't introduce because I offer them separately. And I think this is just a nice addition to something that I already offer. For those of you interested in shimmer paints, I want to offer a kind of an introduction to mica paints. And I have more like expensive, heavily, aggressively shimmering pigments, like the color shift ones, the holographic ones. I have tiny amounts of it. They're very expensive. But I know people that are making way nicer micas, or more special micas than this. This is a take on my mixing palette, only translated into micas. A thing that I found most important was that I needed to know which pigments were in the micas, that I needed to know that the micas were actually sourced in the right way. I've kind of lost the word for it. Ethically sourced, I think. And I needed to know which pigments gave the colors. And it actually gave me quite a hard time to find the right supplier, which had all that information that checked out as well. But you know, I really like offering these next to, you know, the ones I already offer. And to be honest, some versions of this, my coffee is almost finished. Some paints of this are, I actually would suggest to anyone kind of not using mica paints to give them a try, because this earthy red shimmer, this earthy brown shimmer, this green goldish shimmer, but also the it's like a cobalt green, the blue as well. The red and warmer colors they really need very specific use, but the earthy ones, especially these three and this green, maybe this blue as well, really is awesome to use just a bit of it in details, because it gives a sense of depth and not a sense of a gimmick. And that's why I've never used shimmers in my own work before, because I really thought that was like for very specific uses. But here I am offering shimmers. And I do offer one. Yeah, it reflects light, but it's also, like I said, these are all pigment based. So these are all colored with an iron oxide red, for instance, or an ultramarine, or a phthalo, or so they have some of the qualities of that pigment while being a shimmer. This one I also offer. This is the Xenixal Golden White. This is actually not a mica pigment, but an aluminum pigment. So this actually has a pigment number, a single pigment number. PM1, I think. I need to check that. I'm sorry about this. The PM1? Yeah. So PM1, pigment metal 1. It is a coated aluminum pigment, but this one actually is not really not coated in a way that it gives a different color. So this is a highly warmish silver, which can also be polished and I've also lost a word for using this. Oh, really, my coffee still needs to work. But what is it called again? Help me out. Burnisher. Thank you. You can burnish the pigment. Thank you very much for that. And what it does, when you burnish the aluminum pigment, it loses all the individual shimmer it gives. You kind of polish it. You press down the texture of the paper, and it gives you not in reflection, but in smoothness and in how it reflects light, an almost mirror-ish effects, but not the amount of reflection. You can't imitate a mirror with it, but it's really people do that with gold leaf, but metal pigments like aluminum pigments or copper or anything, bronze, great to burnish those to have a different effect, but you lose the entire texture of your paper. Okay, I was kind of reading everything. Powdered graphite. Powdered graphite. Okay, let me have a look. I wanted to make paint, but you know. I should have a swatch of my graphite paint, which I also now offer in my it works. I don't know if it's actually visible on camera, but let me have a look if I can. I know I can zoom in. There you go. It works with graphite too. Yeah, with this it wouldn't work. I don't think it really adds a lot for me, but it's always nice to know what is possible. Thanks, Stephanie. Yeah, as a pre-order, I got the questions so many times, and I have enough of the pigment now. I didn't have it before. And to be honest, Tracy, there were so many people getting the quinacridone dispersion that is available on the market, which is more affordable as well, I have to admit that. So it's not a special thing anymore, but I was kind of like, okay, I have the pigment, it is offered by so many people, and I got asked about it so many times that I almost felt forced to offer it, almost. but I wanted to offer it as a pre-order as well, to see how much demand there is for it. Demand is quite high, to be honest. So I have enough for the orders now and the foreseeable future, but I'm not sure if I can keep that as a standard paint in the line that I offer. Okay, let's focus again. I'm looking at what I can make now that wouldn't take too much of my time, or since it's 1 o'clock here and in 45 minutes I need to pick up my girls from school, so I'm going to make some dots of Viridian green, since the last layer isn't dry yet. Okay, yeah, I've been thinking about calling it a limited edition. I think it's already on my label, so I didn't really use that term on my Etsy, but I think it's already on my labels. Let's have a look. Yeah, Tracy, yeah, dry pigments. I can direct the guy who makes it to for a trade. Which guy and what trade? Gobstarch, if I may ask. Yeah, which guy, obviously. You wouldn't share that here if you want to do that for a trade, but makes what? That was the question that I had in my mind. Okay, could be interesting, but I think I've mentioned that before here as well. I know someone who makes yin min as well, which is just a chemical process. But like yin min is something that is copyrighted, or at least there is only one manufacturer that has the rights to manufacture and distribute the pigment. Not sell it, distribute to other sellers. So I wanna be careful with things like that. People making their own pigment. I don't know if it's the same guy, but I also want to make sure that I can offer the same color as long as I have that color, without me needing to communicate that to my buyers, my customers. This is a very large muller for this. Okay, it's already dirty. You okay, Tracy? I'm reading that in the voice. But yeah, you're right. It's same as my Frangelico blue. At the moment, I have some pigment left. I can make what has been ordered, and I can maybe make a little bit more. But really, I don't have time to make new pigments right now. I really need to make time for it, and that takes a while, as you might know. So. What is that? Sometimes there are scratches in my slab that really, it looks like a speck of dust or something. But then, you can't see it on camera, but there's like a scratch in my slab that just catches paint, and I can't scratch it out unless you clean it with water. No, it's good to hear that you're okay. I have the same sometimes, but oh, sorry about the noise. Getting a little bit too sticky. But that's good for the dots. Also, this is a lot of milling for just a scoop of pigment, especially this pigment. We can use a little bit of water. It's already so much better. Yes, this is PG 18. This is a new pigment of PG 18 that I'm using. I have used for the last time I sold this. I also opened a new bottle for it. I had some left in a bottle, and I opened it to top off some pans that were filled, that needed a last layer, and it didn't re-wet. So there was an error or a fault with the pigment. I've tried new recipes, I've tried different proportions, I've tried everything, and that pigment, I got a message from a customer that said it just doesn't want to re-wet. Is this normal? Nope. It is a little bit harder to re-wet, as you know, if you compare it with some other greens. But I've tried it, and I took it out of my shop until I reopened, and actually I have found a pigment that doesn't do the same thing. Yeah, it's everyone knows how to make, or everyone, you can just look up how to make yin min or yin siko or but when you know, a thing with what I've seen on Etsy, for instance, I saw a version of yin min, a lighter and a darker version, and like the natural version being sold. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't buy that because people have certain expectations from yin min, where it would be located as a color, what the properties are, so how much UV it reflects. You know what the great thing about yin min is. It reflects almost all UV, so it will be great for covering your roof with yin min if it was more affordable. To avoid your house from heating up by the sun, for instance. But a darker version, would it have the same properties? I don't know that. But by changing it, because you're heating it up a little bit more or adding a little bit more manganese to it, I think things change too much for it to meet people's expectations for the pigment. And it's not that, you know, if I want to buy yin min on Etsy, for instance, from someone who makes it himself, it's not really cheaper for me to buy it there than if I would buy the original product. Some colors really need more re-wetting than others. Absolutely right. That's one of the properties of a pigment. But you know, not re-wetting at all, or not leaving any pigment on your brush when you left it in the water for an hour, then something is really wrong with the pigment. Yeah, I'm not sure if what the issue was with my previous Viridian. I'm not sure if re-wetting was even like the right term for it. I think the paint just didn't activate at all. Whereas, you know, let's have a look. I have a, this is still a dried, forgot about this one, quinacridone rose, for instance. I'll show you how easily that re-wets in a minute. dried in the tube, yeah, it's on one end, that's kind of a good sign. But Schmincke also uses the same paint in their pens as they do for the tube, so it's kind of, it's almost logical that it dries out when it's not airtight anymore. There are paints that are sold in tubes that won't dry at all in the pens. That's because they have additives that make them not dry out in the tubes, which is ideal for the end user, but it also says something about, you know, adding things to paint. As you might be able to see, the paint gets stickier and stickier, and the sun is actually fully on my blinds now, so it's acting like a radiator of some sorts. It's quite hot. It's it makes the water evaporate quite easily. So, dots of Viridian. Okay, so here is a dry pen of PV90, and I'm just going to use cheap swatch paper for it. As a demonstration, a wet brush, and a beautiful fluorescent, almost opera pink color. So I would like, yeah, I know. This is like this is the paper that I use to see, you know, if it doesn't wipe off the paper mixes, but it is actually quite okay. It is sized well enough to make the paints like not be absorbed and make the pigments come to their full, you know, saturation. But it's a pre-stamped texture here, so this is great for making paint if you want to just, you know, want to know if it wipes off, if you want to test out recipes or demonstrations like this, right? I mean, I know I've done all my swatches on the best watercolor paper I have for my shop. Now only I need to do color correction. But I want all my paints to be this, and a lot of them are, by the way. I don't know, for those of you who know my paints, you probably might know that they re-wet quite easily. But I would like, I'm sorry, I would like all my pigments to reactivate like this quick. And a lot of them do, and some of them don't, and I can't help it because, you know, that's part of the, what makes a pigment a pigment. Tracy, you're looking into making gouaches, and there's a bit of controversy as whether to add calcium carbonate. I think we've talked about this before, right here, that there's a certain brand who claims that they use more pigments in their gouaches. That means in their watercolors they use less pigment. Exactly, Corpstarch. Some pigments are very opaque on their own, but I mean, you can't just add more. You name it. Really, if I, for instance, my Indian yellow, nickel dioxide yellow, PY153. If I would add more pigment to it, it literally doesn't want to blend, doesn't want to mix or wet with the binder before starting mulling. If I do that on a very small scale and mull it for quite a long time, it just wipes off the paper. If I add any more pigment to that paint, it'll fall out the pen, it wipes off the paper. It's not paint anymore. Like that beautiful glue that is your binder just can't work with that much pigment. So there are pigments that just don't work like that. And yet there is a brand, there are brands, I don't know. There's a brand, and there are people who claim that just adding more pigment makes things more opaque without any additives. But I think we'll agree on that. That's not possible. Exactly. Thanks, Stephanie, for that comparison. Well, it's Corpstarch. I think for acrylics, it would be kind of more logical to claim that they can't add more pigment to their binder. There are a lot of different acrylic emulsions, and some of them are already opaque-ish. So it could be true, and exactly, legally lying. They don't need to mention any filler, but saying that they didn't use any additives or fillers and making it more opaque or like completely matte without saying that they used a different type of binder. It's not lying, but it's not telling the truth either. But yeah, brands that offer a line of acrylics and then an acrylic gouache. And claim to have used some kind of magic on the pigments that make them more opaque and completely matte. There's a company that claims pure pigment, 30-80% pigment load, no fillers, no additives, pure paint only. I really want to know which I'm really bad at. I'm not bad at remembering numbers. I just really don't care for them when a big company mentions it, so I don't know. And welcome, Durwood, exactly. I really want to know which brand that was. Anyone send me a DM, please, or anything. I know that there are a few brands that made claims. like that. Same as some pure mineral watercolors, for instance. I'm going to check it in a minute, since I'm going to end my live stream. Not I want to say not in too long, but I think I'm going to end it in a minute. I'm going to check it, since my phone is streaming at the moment. I can check it a little bit later. Everyone, thanks for joining me again. Thanks for the chat. Thanks for everyone joining. Thanks for everyone visiting the shop, supporting me, you name it. Very thankful, very grateful for everyone who is joining up in the chat or rewatching it. And I really am curious right now. So I'm going to end it. Everyone, have a great day. See you next time. I think I can make one more paint, but I'm going to do that just quickly on my own here, because I really want to listen to some music as well. Bye guys, see you soon, and have a wonderful day.